for interrupting this great dialogue we already started, but I swear after this, I will be nowhere to interrupt. But thank you all, everyone, for coming. My name is Kimberly Vogel. I am the Director of Community Engagement within the Black Studies Center. I am also one of the co-founders of the Laramie Human Rights Network. And I'd like to welcome everyone to our latest webinar series. It's a presentation about critical self-awareness and anti-racist leadership. And before I introduce our speakers tonight, I couldn't move forward without addressing the racist interruptions that some of you may know happened at our last webinar earlier this week. Witnessing such a reprehensible act during an educational webinar, specifically about Black history, for me personally was disheartening, infuriating, and so difficult to move past and to act with such poise, like I believe everyone in the panel did, that was interrupted during that. But at the same time, it's also motivational, I think, especially when you look at the context in which the Black Studies Center at the University of Wyoming was being created in, and the type of work that we provide and the type of educational materials we provide for the community. So as a community activist and an assistant in the center, I could not fathom moving forward through these Black History Month celebrations without reflecting on this incident and exploring what it means for Black people across the nation, especially in educational capacities, because this pushback, no matter how reprehensive it is, it's casual, and it's definitely not a rare incident. And I think that you'll find that especially true once you start talking to other Black educators across the country, especially in rural places. And like everything that the Black Studies Center offers, this incident was a prime example for non-Black people that are consuming our educational components to see firsthand how Black people and Black history are perceived by the majority of people in this country, and why in 2021 today we are still pushing to have things and also prove the importance of things like a Black Studies Center and Africana Studies and things of that matter. And while we've received numerous letters reaching out to the Black Studies Center for support and to offer assistance, it is the lack of support and attention to detail from the institution that hosts this center that was most difficult to experience in the aftermath. The Black Studies Center's goal in expanding access to educational components that are lacking within mainstream educational avenues cannot go without explicitly calling out, addressing, and condemning racism as it exists in our society historically and today. And this task begins with using words like racist and racism when we come into contact with it. We cannot beat around the bush when it comes to talking about things like Monday and the use of the N-word with the hard R, and the perpetual action of just trying to silence, diminish, and ultimately oppress Black people and Black history. And although those in power refuse or are unable to do that and to use those words specifically, we are even more motivated to continue the work that we are doing within the Black Studies Center in order to play our part in progressing our communities towards equality, whether that's in Laramie, Wyoming, or across the nation anywhere. So through this experience, we have been reassured that what the Black Studies Center is offering is not only necessary, but extremely timely for the social context we are all living in. And so in saying that, I am just extremely grateful for our presenters tonight and our presentation that we have. I think it is the absolute perfect way to follow up an egregious act like this with such strong women that have been doing absolutely phenomenal things within their communities, especially with education. And so without further ado, I will introduce our speakers tonight. Dr. Hearn is an instructional coordinator within San Diego Unified School District, where she provides leadership support for administrators and professional development for all around the district's anti-bias, anti-racist initiative and the Black Youth Call to Action. Her early career began as an elementary school educator, where she served as an instructional coach for elementary, middle, and high school teachers. And she has also served as a K-12 curriculum writer and a consultant. So when thinking about why Black History Month even still exists, and why Black history lessons are so lacking in many of our educational systems. It's people like Dr. Hearn that are boots on the ground and making those absolutely necessary and long overdue pushes to making curriculum comprehensive and ensuring that the history of America is not whitewashed and is not perceived as a white history or just as Black oppression, because it is much more dense and thorough than that. Our second presenter tonight is Ebonee Weathers, and she has a decade-long teaching tenure with San Diego Unified School District, and she's been passionate about her commitment to advocating for and supporting students through the foundational framework of anti-bias and anti-racist pedagogy. Mrs. Weathers has 10 years of classroom teaching experience, with 9 of those spent in the inner city, Title I school, MED degrees in multicultural education, and English and bachelor levels degree in elementary education and studio arts. So a resume that's even hard for me to say all at once, a phenomenal background and experience in a plethora of educational avenues. Mrs. Weathers is also a 3-time Teacher of the Year at school level, as well as a San Diego Unified School District Teacher of the Year. So we also have, I'm sure the trophies are behind you on one of those little shelves that we can see later. And currently, Mrs. Weathers is managing San Diego's Unified School District's Youth Advocacy Program and leading the district's work around LGBTQIA+ education and advocacy, culturally responsive and sustaining programming, bullying prevention and intervention, as well as partnering with Dr. Hearn to develop, support, and breathe life into the anti-biased and anti-racist pedagogy program. So without further ado, I will hand over this presentation to our wonderful speakers. And as has already been said, please feel free to add commentary, questions, anything that you feel in the chat, and we will do our best to moderate and get to all of those. So thank you again, Dr. Hearn and Mrs. Weathers. I am extremely excited to see what you have to offer us tonight, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you for that bomb introduction. I'm over here.
Kimberly, woo, I was like, what? Who that?
I don't know how the chat's rolling tonight. I saw in here that it could be disabled, which is unfortunate. We had some participatory events, but we'll find a way to make it work. We got some questions already that we're going to actually respond to as part of our presentation, but we're excited to be here. We had a little bit prepared about ourselves. We are going to be bringing critical self-awareness today. We have a short time together, so this is really just an introduction with hopefully a lot more to come. But Dr. Hearn, you're up first for this one.
This is
already hooked it up, so not much left to say, but
Kimberly said it all. I don't want to keep like saying more to sound like I'm bragging, but no. My name is Naya, and my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm an instructional coordinator with our Academics Through Agency department in the San Diego Unified School District. And I'll pass it to you, Ebonee, so we don't have to keep going on.
This is me, Ebonee. My pronouns are also she, her, hers, and Dr. Hearn and I travel around San Diego Unified. It's the 2nd largest district in the state of California. We share our photographs, our PK-12 photos here, because a lot of the educators that we work with are working with elementary, middle, high school students. And so it's a good practice to kind of remember where we were at that stage in life and kind of what we needed. And our hope is that we can bring that to teachers and classrooms, not just in Unified, but across our country.
We're also intentional on that who we be piece at the top. I just wanted to give them heads up, Ebonee, that we're also intentional about our language and how we speak. And you'll hear us code switching maybe throughout, because that is our language. We are fluent in African American English as well as Standard American English. So that is in honor of that. There's a link there that Ebonee did one of her, what is it, a thesis on for African American vernacular?
That's right.
Link.
That's right. Check it out. I don't know if we share here or later, but we'll make sure you get your hands on the pieces of the presentation so you can check out those resources. We're going to start, and this is also linked. So when you see anything underlined, or over here you see the feather with the arrow pointing to it, those are all clickable links. We like to kick off all of our presentations with a land acknowledgement. There's a video here. We're not going to share it. It's about 5 minutes long. And we want to spend the bulk of our time today kind of responding to questions that come up in the chat and delivering our information. But we do just want to take a moment to honor the ancestral grounds that we're collectively gathered upon, and support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown worldwide. I'm currently joining today online from my home, which is on the traditional unceded territory of the Kumeyaay people. So you can check out what land you are on. There are links here when you get your hands on this presentation. So feel free, it's pretty interesting to see where you stand or sit.
Oh, we suddenly got large on the screen. Ebonee's people are gone.
I'm sharing mine, so I can't see.
Oh, yeah, I can only see you and me, and it's like we're super big, so it just threw me off. So James Baldwin said that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it speaks. And I really think that's important, especially based upon the introduction that Timberly brought up about the racist Zoom bombing incident that happened this Monday. And this is just another example of why it's so important that we have these critical and sometimes what some people describe as difficult conversations, but we have to have them. They're necessary. So this is how we roll normally and typically. We're always so used to having a very interactive discussion where people are able to unmute or to respond in the chat, but unfortunately we're not able to do that today. So bear with Ebonee and I because we talk back and forth to each other and to the crowd. And since we don't have the crowd, you might hear both of us talking back and forth with each other. But just thinking about this discussion, we'll engage in around topics such as identity, race, oppression, justice, all of these things. It's just important that even you as yourself, even though you're not taking part in the discussion, that you remember that there is no growth in the comfort zone and there's no comfort in the growth zone. But at the same time, you may need to take care of yourself and be mindful of where you're at, how you're feeling, and where you're sitting in this space in the discussion.
Real quick, today we're going to look at some data just to lay the groundwork. We're going to be going topically over race and racism, implicit bias, a little bit of microaggression, but we're going to hit hard white supremacy culture and white privilege. And that was some of the questions that we were getting. Josiah, if you're still here, shared a couple of questions earlier, and we're going to cover responses to those. The discussions and reflections, because we don't have that interactive component that Dr. Hearn mentioned, anytime you see in the chat, we're going to invite you to take that moment to kind of reflect with yourself, or if you have somebody in the space with you. And we have a couple of videos that we hope that you enjoy. These are two of my very favorites. And then if it's something you do enjoy, we hope you take these pieces and bring them to your family, your home, your classroom, your practice, because I think they can be powerful tools to start these conversations.
See, that's our old business of classroom teachers, Ebonee, because we didn't even collaborate. And once they closed that chat, I too said in my head, as soon as we get to these questions where we would have asked you to respond in the chat, we're just going to have to ask you to think about them and reflect within yourself. So what is the difference between self-awareness and critical self-awareness? Think about that.
So for our work, and we have a follow-up to this coming up in just a second, but in more or less words, critical self-awareness is really looking deeply and critically at who we are within a given context at a given time to see how our power, privilege, and positionality impact those around us. We have a little bit more to add to this, but really the reality comes down to when we look at who we are and how we impact others, we can see where the gaps are. We know what's broken. We can very clearly see, I think, a lot of people who have continued to be in this space, we know what's broken. The problem is we can't fix it until we start to look at it. And not just, the question earlier was, is this just a white problem? It is absolutely not just a white problem. Each of us, regardless of our race, need to look critically at who we are and how we contribute to this problem. And our hope is to start that conversation, that dialogue today. Maybe not a dialogue, more of a monologue today in light of recent events.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, get everyone into space thinking.
But so, in just adding to what Ebonee just said, with the critical self-awareness, when you're self-aware, you're aware of self, but we're asking you to be critically self-aware, the criticality meaning coming from the critical theory, where you look at oneself through the position of systems and oppressive systems, like Ebonee said, where you are in terms of power, privilege, the dominant culture narratives, all those extra pieces. And for educators, I know we have some people that may not be educators in the crowd, but if you're doing this, this is a critical first step in your process of becoming critically self-aware in order to be an anti-biased, anti-racist leader.
And Toby keeps reminding us in the chat, you can still respond via Q&A. So please, as much as you can, respond. We would love that. That's what we thrive off of. This is our little data piece here, and we wanted to share some of the data from where we're coming from, which is San Diego Unified School District. And we also have some data from University of Wyoming, just to give some impetus for this work, and to kind of see where we as presenters and facilitators are coming from today. So this is our 2018-19 data. This is our student teacher race data. In magenta, you'll see represented the students of our district. Across the bottom, you'll see the different racial groups identified. And then in the teal color, you'll see our teachers. And you'll see over there in the far right column, 66+% of our teachers, our educators are white, 24% of our students are white. And so you'll see these disparities as you go across the line with the number of white teachers that we have, and the very high number of white teachers we have, and a very small percentage of white students that we have. And so how do we close those gaps in understanding, in positionality and power, and get to this critical piece of self-awareness for our students as well as our educators? This is the data that we have for University of Wyoming. This is 2017 data. There's a citation there at the bottom if you're interested in checking out some more. There was actually some really beautiful graphics. But these are the ones that I thought would be most relevant today. We looked at the enrollment here by race as well. Over on the left, you will see that 2017 data for students, a massive number of white enrollees. And we thought this was especially important because as we continued to look at this data, you'll see here the graduation rates by race and gender. But the part that really stood out to me was this right here. Of that massive number of students who are enrolled that identified as white, the top 3 degrees awarded in 2017 were registered nursing, general psychology, and elementary education and teaching. All those professions where we're outreaching to the public, we're in professions of service and help, and where those students are going to be going out into the world and connecting with people of diverse backgrounds, diverse racial and ethnic identities. And so we thought this was incredibly important to highlight because that's where the work needs to happen. This awareness for that massive number of students, for all students, but these students who are going out into the helping professions to really be able to be critically self-aware of how they are engaging with other people in these spaces.
So the point being then that this is not just a people of color thing, then this is an everybody, white people included thing, whether you have a large group of number of students of color or not, this kind of work is necessary to engage in because as Ebonee just pointed out, you still are going out into the world and in these professions serving people of color and from all backgrounds. So how did we get here?
We have some things coming up here, but we wanted to start off with getting really curious. And we started off with some inquiry, you know, how did we get here? We look at the state of the world, of this country, and of what's happening just with these Black History Month workshops that y'all are putting on. And to think about how did we get here? You have to really get curious, not just about what's around you, the context, but how you engage in that sphere. So we have a couple of questions here. Number one, how do ideas about intelligence and race shape educational opportunities and barriers? And how did individuals and communities resist ideologies of inferiority and inequities in education? Because you can't have one without the other, right? When we look at these in context, we see that there's this lack of opportunity, there's undue opportunity, and with that comes this resistance. We wanted to highlight a few of the practices because when we talk to our groups in our spaces, a lot of people say, you know, redlining, segregation, we're done with that. Slavery is over. What are we talking about? And we wanted to make it really clear by making direct correlations between the historical names and the present day names we have for the exact same practices. So some of these terms might make more sense in our world of PK-12 education. But if that is the case, these are practices that many of us in this space have been subject to, have inflicted upon other people. So they might be something that makes sense to you as well. So when we look at things like redlining of the past, we see those things show up when we look at things like tracking gifted and talented education programs, special education programs. It's a way of lining off and roping off and tracking students into outcomes that we think that they need to be in, things that we believe that they're capable of, and then create the conditions to support that outcome. Poll taxes and poll assessments. In our world, we see that as, you know, we're going to exclude students from participating in field trips and educational opportunities that might open doors to them because they don't meet the standards, such as a grade, such as, you know, never being suspended, detention, expulsions. Segregation now looks like suspension and expulsion. We're removing people from the environment where they need to be to thrive, grow, and learn. Colonization, we see all over the place. We just pulled out a couple. Dress codes, behavior codes, classroom management, and then profiling. You know, I put the word profiling over here because really we're doing the same thing there.
Absolutely.
We have tardy sweeps, and we have, in our world, we have these things called power cards where, let's say you're going from second grade to third grade, the second grade teacher will sum up all of what a student is, does, can be on this card so that the teacher for the following year in third grade can then kind of figure out which kids should be where based on their behavior or what I think they're capable of. Definitely a way that we're showing that we're still profiling, tracking the students in the spaces around us.
All right, guess what? The chat is back open. So in the chat, is race real? Let me see some responses, please. That's a question to you folks out there. Is race real?
We got one. Thank you, Skylar. We got one yes. And feel free to follow up. We got one no. Racialized groups are real. Social construct, but it's real insofar as people are being racialized. Only in a social regard. Great. So we got a whole range of people's ideas in here.
Absolutely.
Race is real as an effective society. All right.
Okay. So to answer the question, and the short answer, no, race is not real. Race is a social construct. It's understood to be by most people as a mixture of physical, behavior, or cultural attributes, but there is no scientific basis for race. So it is not real. This description of ethnicity on the other side describes it as differences between people, mostly on the basis of language and nationality. But flip it, Ebonee, so we can move. I want to say just because race isn't real does not mean that the outcomes from it, meaning racism, isn't real. So this is why it's important to talk about it, because everyone has a racialized identity. Because even though race is socially constructed, there are still outcomes, advantages for some, disadvantages for others based upon their skin color. It has a major impact on one's life, things that they are afforded opportunities to do or not to do. So it is definitely very important to talk about. And although we can't acknowledge race itself as being real, we have to acknowledge that there are outcomes from it that are very much real and impact people. All right, None of us are exempt from racialized experiences. We all have racialized identities, regardless of our race. So in the chat then, since we said that race is not real, then tell me what racism is. What do you think racism means? Because racism is an act or an outcome of that social construct of race, as I just pointed out.
And I think this was, I was wanting to ask this earlier when the questions came up, can Black people be racist?
Yeah, that came up.
I think that depends on what is your definition of racism. I think there's a pretty standard agreed upon definition that we're gonna share. But if you have something, and I'm trying to follow the chat too, Amber, I'm sorry to hear these power cards and this idea of summing up what a child is on a 3x5 card. I don't know what good could possibly come from that.
Right, just like discriminatory practices based on someone's personal biases.
Tanner's got power plus prejudice, oppressive behavior, treating someone differently based on their physical attributes and or what they believe or where they are from. Thank you. Also, thanks for keeping it clean in the chat, you know?
Thank you, I'm appreciating that. Okay, all right, well, we'll see, Erica, and think about that, okay.
All right, so here is our definition. I think it looks a lot like some of the things that were set up there, Tanner's. Racism is racial prejudice. We define prejudice as unfounded beliefs mixed with irrational fear, plus this idea of institutional power. And I think Erica alluded to that in her comment in the chat. That you cannot have this racism without institutional power. And I want you to think about, in this country, in this world, who has the power?
Absolutely. So race is not real, but racism is real, right? The outcomes from it. I keep repeating that because it's very much important that we acknowledge that. It's also very much important that we look at what Mary said in the chat, that racism includes the power to impact another based on your actions. Now, we like to bring to your attention 3 kinds of racism. Dr. Jones in 2012 pointed this out, and I'll explain it to you because people tend to think of one kind of racism when they think of racist, but there's also evidently more than that. So internalized racism is something that really reflects people of color, BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous, or people of color that are stigmatized and oppressed races. They tend to accept the negative messages about their own abilities and worth and actually believe in the dominant narrative. It shows up in people as embracing and mimicking whiteness, trying to be white, sound white, look white, act like, and it develops as a certain learned helplessness and self-hatred. Another type of racism is personally mediated. This is the type that people usually think of when they think about, oh, I'm not racist, because this is, entails individuals' own prejudice or discrimination and their own beliefs about different people's abilities or motives or intentions, or, just their personal actions toward others, poor service, lack or no respect. Seeing a person of color in a store and, following them around because you think they're suspicious because of their skin, things like that. And then finally, we have institutionalized racism, and it's sometimes too also referred to as systemic or structural racism. And this is basically referring to a system. This is like the spiderless web, right? It doesn't need a spider, so it doesn't need actors to actually have it take place. This is already in place based on policies, practices. It shows up as access to or lack of access to material conditions, different access to quality education, housing, or employment. It also shows up as access to power or lack of access to power, different access to information through history, through resources, generational wealth, having a voice in voting, all of those things. I could go on and on and on, but we don't have time. So click it, Ebonee. And so who is the gardener? Because this was an analogy in Jones's article about when you water and nourish and cultivate flowers and tell them who they are and show them and how they grow. But the gardener is somebody that's in power. So you can think of maybe the government or just anybody that's in a position of power, like Ebonee said, even with those power cards, who has the decision or the ability to decide, make decisions, or to act, has control of the resources. And this is really dangerous when the gardener is allied or partnered up with one group and not others, you know, versus everybody, not concerned at all with equity.
So we have a question. It's a true false. You can pop it in the chat if you'd like, or just consider it on your own. And I'd like to come back to this question. We're going to watch a quick video. I think it might be one of my top 3. It's pretty brief. It's about 6 minutes.
Is your type? That is like your top one. You love this video.
I love this video, but there are others.
Mm-hmm.
I love Sonia Renee Taylor, though. So you know what I'm saying? Here's the statement. Your action or inaction can be racist or anti-racist at any time, depending on what you choose or choose not to do. Is this true or false? Or I guess the alternative would be just that we are racist or non-racist, racist or anti-racist. As you respond, I'm going to pull up this video. And here it is. If you've seen it, you know. If you know, you know.
Yep.
But if you haven't seen it, you need to see it. So it's about 6 minutes long. And we're going to come back together and kind of consider this idea a little bit more.
I also will reply to Josiah's original question, or whoever that was, can Black people be racist and are white people only the people that are racist? Oh, we'll get to it. So it's coming.
You're about to talk over my video.
Yep. Nope, I'm done.
We just had the most amazing.
We'll just call a spade a spade. Saying I'm not a racist and being anti-racist is like 2 different things.
When most people think of racism, they think of, you know, let's say what happened to George Floyd, or they think of the KKK, or they think of slavery. And when that is kind of your perception, it's very easy to say, well, I would never do that. I would never do that awful thing, which is valid, but it's more nuanced than that.
Someone saying like, I'm not a racist doesn't help the problem. Simply saying, I'm not doing that does not save somebody's life. It's like witnessing someone getting jumped and being like, hey, I didn't jump him. Like, but you also just stood there while he or she got jumped. And being an anti-racist is like, 1, getting involved and being like, break it up, stop this. And 2, speaking out to make sure it never happens again.
I would say on a very basic level, it's just about passive and active language, right? To say one is not racist doesn't actually connote any action. If you think about, let's pick baseball. To be not racist is going for a bunt. You know, you hold the bat out, the ball, you hope the ball hits the bat. You're not expecting to hit the ball hard. You just want to get the ball to connect with the bat so that you can attempt to make a play. To be anti-racist is to swing the bat as hard as you can and go for the home run. To put in the extra effort to shoot for the stars and to actually swing that bat, right? To risk the strike, right? But you swing the bat as hard as you can every single time, right? Because you understand that that's the way you win games. That's the way you change things.
One of the most freeing things that white people can do, or actually any human being on the planet could do right now, is to just say, of course I'm racist. Of course I'm racist. If you grew up in a house that spoke French and you, as a baby, just started laying in your crib, listening to people speak French over you, you wouldn't have to do anything to start gaining proficiency in the French language. You would just speak it because that's what's being spoken around you. Our society speaks racism. It has spoken racism since we were born. Of course you are racist. Of course. The idea that somehow this blanket of ideas has fallen on everyone's head except for yours is magical thinking. It's useless.
Look, I think we celebrate the best of us, but I also think we had to live self-examined lives to mine and excavate the worst of us in order for there to actually be a good world, right? And I think that's what everyone's afraid to do.
The best way to get over stuff is to talk about it. this stuff will never change until people become comfortable having these uncomfortable conversations on both sides. Both sides. I mean, they're not comfortable conversations. I mean, I've had to have conversations with people in my family, and I'm in an interracial relationship, and having the conversation is not the easiest thing to do, but you have to do it.
It's really easy to kind of unintentionally create an echo chamber. A lot of us are friends with people who look like us and who have the same beliefs as us. But having these conversations, especially, if you do have family members who harbor these like really, really toxic beliefs about Black people, rather than you talking about it with your fellow woke white friends, go talk to that relative.
That's the difference between non-racist and anti-racist. Anti-racist is about action. That to do nothing is to leave the system firmly in place. It is to absolutely affirm the status quo of certain bodies being allowed resource access opportunities and other bodies being literally killed. So if you want to assure that racism stands, continue being non-racist. But if you would like to see racism dissolve, if you would like to see the interruption of racism, the interruption of white supremacy, then what you'll do is say, where do I speak French? And how do I translate that to a language that is less harmful? I think we all have the opportunity to do that right now.
To my allies out there, I'd say first and foremost, listen to your brothers and sisters who are Black, and then listen to yourself. Tap into you. Who are you? And be honest. Be honest about your biases. Be honest about how you really feel when I come around. How would you really feel if your daughter brought home meat, or your son, or how many times you heard your parents say something racist and you let it slide because you figured it wasn't worth having the conversation. Like these are the things, right? Or how many times you watched a television show and you laugh at something that you knew was actually not funny at all and could be harmful for other people in this world.
I want you to see it. I want you to actually feel it and understand that it's wrong versus just knowing that it's wrong. Because I can know so many things are wrong and still engage in wrong activity. But until I feel that it's like wrong and until it like bothers me to do these things, then I won't really be an effective participant in this.
I think there are a lot of people right now in this moment that are awakened in a new way. They're like, oh, I see some things that I just never saw before. Wow, it's like the great white wokeness. And it's not enough to just be awake. We wake up every morning, and if you adjust that in your bed once you were awake, nothing would get done. So when you wake up, you do something. Tiny things. I say, if you really are a person who's like, I believe everyone is equal. I believe everyone is equal. Is your bookshelf equal? Are the restaurants that you go to equal? Are the physicians and the professionals that you hire in your life, are they equal? Is your social media feed equal? Because yes, the more expansive your world is, the more people you start to think about. When someone says humans, you see an array of humans, not just white humans. And that is how we start to change things. Because if I can think about you on a conscious level, then your life really does matter. I will make sure that it actually matters.
All right. What'd y'all think?
Giving some snaps to Sonia.
All right. I'm trying to check in the chat. I can't see it. So if y'all see anything.
Yeah, I gave somebody the link to the video. They asked for the title and said that the video is amazing, and thank you. And you're welcome.
Right. We have 15 minutes left, and we really want to get to this last piece of white privilege. We have some takeaway resources linked at the end of this presentation as well. So we're going to try to get to as much as we can. Please feel free to continue to engage respectfully in the chat. We would love to hear from you, respond to questions. But we're going to kick it off with white folks being the targets of racism or oppression. Naya, you taking it away? You want me to take it away?
Take it, because I got the next couple. So yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
So typically, this question comes up all the time, this idea of reverse racism, oppression, intersectionality even. So we've pulled these three out really just to bring some awareness to. Oppression, being white, does not mean you have not experienced hardships or oppression in your life. It is that whiteness is not one of those things. Intersectionality, it does mean that you have not faced hardships or oppression based on the color of your skin. White people can possess other marginalized parts of their identity, but their race is not one of those. And then this idea of reverse racism, again, I mean, if we reference this definition that we shared earlier of racism and the idea of power, institutional power, reverse racism generally refers to the concept of white people being systemically disenfranchised by people of color because of their race. Though people of color can participate in individual acts of bias and prejudice. We see this all the time, right? It's all the Fox News wants to show us. Against white people are free from the systemic discrimination that people of color regularly face. And I loved how somebody in the chat earlier put, and impact the outcomes of those people, right? So we can have this personally mediated kind of racism happening, but this idea of systemic racism where I or this group can now impact your outcomes, we don't see that within this, idea of reverse racism, because BIPOC people are not the ones who hold the institutional power in most spaces.
Absolutely. Okay, so in the chat, what is white supremacy? Anybody? We have good wait time. We used to be classroom teachers many moons ago.
Kindergarten teachers at that. They're not the ones you have to wait for. It's the middle school ones that are like really don't want to be judged in front of their peers. Having an advantage based solely on you being white, love it. Rachel, ideology that only white people should retain power. White is better, more deserving. Structural domination. Dr. Hearn's going to share a couple of key points that we'd like to share.
So from Layla Said's book, Me and White Supremacy, she defined white supremacy as an ideology, a paradigm, an institutional system, as some of you pointed out, and a worldview. The historic and modern legislating, societal conditioning, and systemic institutionalizing of the construction of whiteness as inherently superior. However, when you're thinking about white supremacy, it's not a person or race. You got to separate the idea of that when you're looking at it from as this ideology as an institution of whiteness. And that goes into white supremacy culture, which consists of thoughts, beliefs, and actions grounded in whiteness that are perceived to be superior to the thoughts, beliefs, and actions of people and communities of color. So this is something key to point out here on the bottom, that a person does not have to identify as a white supremacist to uphold white supremacy culture. And I'll tell you an example in just a minute if we need to. And one does not have to identify as white to perpetuate white supremacy culture, right? So somebody pointed out, Loretta Ross said that not all white supremacists are white, and not all white people are white supremacists, Josiah and everybody else. So no, we're not saying that all white people are racist or white supremacists. We are talking about this idea of this culture of holding up whiteness as inherently superior. And like we said, that you don't have to be white. People of color, I have perpetuated the white supremacy culture as an internalized racist. An example of that I can share with you is something that I've done with my own children, telling them, yes.
Of your 5 children.
Oh, my 5 beautiful children. Yes, I know. And so I have told them and taught them that they have to play the game, right? And in doing that, originally just all those years, I never even thought about that and reflected on that to a much later time and recognized what I was referring to when I told them that they have to play the game is I was telling them that they have to learn how to mimic whiteness. They have to learn how to look white, act white, talk white, be white in order to be accepted in society for reasons through their education, through their future employment. For my sons who continuously get pulled over as Black males so that they do not appear to be a threat and dangerous because their skin color of Black is considered a weapon in America. So all of those things. So that was my upholding and perpetuation of the white supremacy culture.
And I think and that's why it's so important to highlight, we each have a piece in looking critically at ourselves, because what messages, how are we enacting this on the daily for ourselves? But also, I have 2 kids as well. And what am I presenting to my kids when, like as Dr. Hearn pointed out in the beginning, with even code switching, if I'm to be seen as a professional, my profession being an educator, why must I speak in this way? Why can I not be who I am, speak African-American vernacular English, Ebonics, whatever you want to call it, because my profession is to be a facilitator, a connector of people. So when we think about this idea of professionalism, is that really matching what I need my profession to look like? Or is it matching this colonial idea, this white supremacist idea of what professional, smart, intelligent, what those things are? And I think for me, more often than not, it has nothing to do with my profession. It has everything to do with whiteness and this idea of white supremacy culture. And so we kind of just walked through this for ourselves. We hope that you can take this away as something that you consider on the daily or regularly, whether you are white or BIPOC. How are you upholding or maintaining the system of white supremacy culture? Because like we said, we each play a part in it. And so to consider how we're doing this in our personal and professional lives is a first step in really uncovering and excavating those pieces so that we can look at them in the daylight and start to dissolve, as Sonia Renee Taylor said in the video.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Privilege, white privilege. So white privilege is an outcome of the white supremacy culture, right? And as Ebonee pointed out earlier on that other slide, since white people in America hold most of the political, institutional, and economic power, they receive the advantages that non-white groups do not. So it's just, thinking about the 2 sides. If there's somebody being advantaged, then of course there's somebody being disadvantaged. So this white culture, like we just pointed out, is the standard by which all other groups are compared to and judged by. And people who identify as white rarely have to think about, if ever, their racial identity, because they live in a culture where whiteness has been normalized. It's kind of like that picture of the fish in water, right? It's all through you, through and through. These are some statistics. They're a little bit older, from 2016 and 17. So you'll see like the president and the vice president, 100% white does not apply anymore, bam. But it was true at that time.
Yeah, you can find these in Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, and the page citations down there at the bottom. I think when you are faced with these numbers, you don't even realize the whiteness in which you walk. For me personally, to walk through the hallways at my place of employment, it's just, that is my life so consistently that I don't even realize the pervasiveness of what's going on. We've got a comment, a question in here, productive educational way, about the N-word. I love that question. We're gonna hit this last video. We have a great video from Paul Scanlon about using white privilege. And I read a quote, I can't remember who put it out. It was on Instagram, I think, but it was, when are we gonna stop talking about how to use our privilege and talking about how we are gonna give up our privilege? And I thought that was such a powerful quote. This video is really about using and giving up pieces of privilege and those perks that come along with it. We're going to close with that, but I do want to get into, as a classroom teacher, to talk about the N-word and why we can't say it. I have a lot of great resources. Teachingtolerance.org is a great website that has a lot of great resources as well for that.
I'll share Ta-Nehisi Coates' video in the chat too while you play the video. Remember his on the N-word? I'll share that one. Okay.
But my response as a classroom teacher working with youth was not, we don't say that here. It is not the teachable moment. The teachable moment is, what is the history of that word? Why does it carry the weight when this group says it versus this group? It's definitely a moment to not shut people down, to not shut youth down, but to educate and to get people to understand the historical backgrounds and the repercussions and impact that they still carry today. So Nea's going to drop that video. Teachingtolerance.org is great. The ADL is a great place to get some resources. And we're going to share this video and try to come back for a couple more questions. I saw another one in there. So I'm gonna share the video and then I'm gonna check these out while we're watching.
So I was speaking at a corporate event in America. I was the guest speaker. That night at dinner, I was at a table full of white people, and the guy, one of the bosses who'd invited me, actually started to tell a joke that I knew straight away was going to be racial. And black people were going to be the butt of the joke. In those split seconds, in the early sentences of the joke, I had a decision to make. Do I say something or stay quiet? No one else was saying anything, though I'm sure they felt uncomfortable. So I spoke up and I said, I don't think this joke is one I want to hear. I don't like the way it's going. I think it's going to be at the expense of black people. I'm not comfortable with that. Would you mind not telling it? Or I could leave the table. It was very uncomfortable. I remember he didn't tell the joke, but it was uncomfortable the rest of the night. Later in my room, I journaled what I felt about what's going on. I thought two things were at play. One was what I would call white solidarity. The other was what I would call white social capital. White solidarity is an unspoken code, I think, that we have as white people that means we would never embarrass each other by creating a racial discomfort for each other, by interrupting a racist joke or pointing out a act of prejudice or discrimination. We cannot keep quiet because it's a social code that we have, that we would remain in solidarity with each other, which protects our whiteness, our white advantage, our white privilege. That was a play at the table that night that allowed him to do what he'd done obviously many times. White social capital is what you get if you stay quiet. You get included, you are one of the boys, you are an insider, you are good to be around, you're a team player, you're fun, which may give you opportunities of inclusion as well in a corporate setting, a business setting, a social setting. It is an accruing of white capital by going along with it. I want to say to my white friends listening to this that our silence at those times is not benign, it is malignant, because we become complicit in the continuation of the racist joke telling. It gets told again and again because when we heard it, we didn't say anything. And as socially awkward as it is, and knowing you'll be penalized if you say something, I'm appealing to us because millions of us every day have this opportunity to say something, to speak up, to stand up for people of color and black people. And you will be excluded and you will lose social capital, but you will be a champion of a cause that you wish someone had been for you at times in your life. And I think many of us feel we can't do anything at the large government level. We can't protest on the streets. We don't feel comfortable with this or that. Can you say something today, wherever you are in your life? Can you speak up? Because our silence is not benign. It is continuing the problem. We can all play a part like this every single day. Let's speak up. Let's play our part, is what I'm appealing for.
All right. I am gonna keep sharing just to scroll through some of these resources that we wanted to leave you all with. I made a comment. I saw somebody in the chat speaking to their kids about, have you noticed that you're white? This is a great activity. It's called Growing Up Culturally. It's based on an activity from the Anti-Defamation League. But these 4 questions, there are actually 12 questions on the whole document, are a great springboard into conversations just about what we believe about race. So that's actually linked. If you click on the little image here, you can download it and use it. We hope that this is not the end of this conversation. We're happy to come back and stay connected with you all, but there is so much opportunity to carry this work over into each and every person's lives here, whether it's across the dinner table or in a classroom or with your kids or with your parents. So we hope that there's some movement here and some room for increased awareness and some conversations to continue. But if you scroll through this presentation, once you get your hands on it, you'll see the outcomes that just kind of guide our work and our passion behind the work. And then at the end, there is a section of resources. There's a video here. There is some text to read, so feel free to take those and run with it. It
I
was
put Ebony for the Gardener's Tale in that Q&A for the person that had that question, so that you could read the article and the framework to see about your question about can it be compared to the Marx theory. And then somebody else had, I also put it in the regular chat, and somebody else had a question in the chat about being fearful of being anti-racist in all white institutions.
Yeah, safety is all, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but safety, personal, physical, emotional safety is always a priority. So if you feel like putting yourself out in different situations is going to cause harm to you physically, emotionally, then that's a no-go. But I think that there has to be a distinction between comfort and safety that we make for ourselves, because what feels uncomfortable is not always necessarily unsafe. So defining that line for yourself and setting up boundaries, I think, is important.
Absolutely. I would second that.
So that's all we have. And I think it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you for keeping it classy. And I'm trying to get to the chat.
Thank you too, and you're welcome. And we'd love to join you again anytime. It was our pleasure to be here.
Naya, can you drop the slides into the chat?
Oh yeah, let me do that quickly.
So much. So Amy, we're going to drop those into the chat. Thank you all so much. This was awesome. Thank you, thank you. Yes, my heart, words of affirmation is my love language. So thank you all for your comments.
And if you all have time, we do have a few questions if y'all want to try to get to some. I know I don't want to take up too much of your evening, so if you have to run, don't worry. But I do see a few questions in the Q&A box that people have been throwing out if you want to.
Yeah, so I think we got to no, we didn't get to Tanner's. We got to one. We got to the anonymous. How can a person of color engage? Shane is saying, cool, a problematic usage of AAVE, or is there a point where the dialect is acceptable common use? If Shane is still here and can clarify that, I would love that, because I think I don't have enough information to answer it. Naya, maybe you.
No, because it just sounds like cool is just a regular word. I didn't know that cool was an AAVE word or slang or anything. So I need some clarification for that as well.
Tanner, the events of this summer is a change from woke to getting out of bed. I would say the change of, the events of this summer and late spring were getting woke, and some people are starting to get out of bed. I would say we still have a lot of work to do. I think for me, the word woke would definitely apply to much of our population actually seeing firsthand. And it was played out so, I don't want to say beautifully, but to bring that into the space, was it Monday in this event, in this Zoom space? And I think that Dr. Dixon addressed it and said it so well, like what you are doing in your cavernous spaces in the dark is being brought to light. And as a Black woman, I've seen it, I know it, it's been going on, but for other people to see it in a platform like this, I think we're definitely still in that period of like waking people up. And there's a lot of getting out of bed and taking some steps to do still.
Mm-hmm.
All right, y'all, have a great evening. I loved being here tonight, and I hope we can stay connected and come back another time.
No doubt. Thank you so much, Mrs. Weathers and Dr. Hearn. This was an absolutely phenomenal presentation. So insightful and like I said, just timely. It couldn't be more perfect timing for this. And especially for Wyoming. And so I really appreciate you two taking the time out of your busy schedules to come and chat with us and share everything that you have been working your entire lives towards. This is absolutely incredible and essential knowledge to know. Dr. Dixon, did you have something?
I just want to take time to thank my family for coming out and delivering to us exactly what we needed at the exact time. We know we crafted this month and schedule, not knowing what we would be facing, but always looking at it with faith, and not faith alone, but works. And what you gave us tonight was faith with works. Couldn't have been any more perfect. But did you all get a chance to see what happened Monday night? Very interesting.
Oh yeah.
Very interesting. And I agree with you, Sister Ebonee, more work to be done. In fact, that's why we're here. I don't think that this particular community is quite ready in general But I think they're moving in that direction. And what more can you ask with such a monolithic population?
Absolutely.
And you know, we go pretty hard. So that part of it is needed. But that's from the training.
Yeah.
And now where you all are, you have helped us again so very much. And yes, we want to welcome you all back out. And you know, we'll work on that.
Absolutely. We were happy to be here. I just wanted to point out that Patrick Ewing Jr. was in the video. I don't know.
That.
Okay. Just saying.
I saw the young fella.
Yeah.
And yes, to answer your question, we did see the video. And yes, to second what Ebonee said, there's definitely a need for, I mean, we're nowhere near being out of bed. There's much work to be done. But thank you, Dr. Dixon, for organizing all of these powerful events all month. They've been great. I've had the opportunity to view a few of them. And thank you, Timberly, as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Timberly. She is the engine that makes us go. And if you guys understand anything about the paradigm, about the youngest is the most important, then we absorb that and we act upon it. So we are training the future generation because, you know, pretty soon it's time to move it along. So I thank you all. And I'm sure that there was a lot gotten out of it as I was reading the chat and things of that nature. So again, not the first time that you guys have been here, and again, not the first time that you've given us this terrific amount of information in such a way.
Thank you so much. I hope you all have a great night, and I hope we can do this again.
Yeah.
All right. We thank you all dearly. We thank you all dearly.
Take care.
Take care.